Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining a new entry in the APS Government Research Funding and Policy webinar series. Today's event is a program primer on NIH's high-risk, high-reward research funding. My name is Andy DeSoto. I'm Director of Government Relations here at APS, and if you're not familiar with our organization, we're an international organization of 30,000 individuals who are dedicated to advancing research psychology for the benefit of science and society. If you have big ideas about how your psychological science research can improve human health or reduce disease, you've logged on to the right webinar. You're about to hear an introduction to a special U.S. National Institutes of Health funding program that supports creative scientists who are pursuing innovative research, including research in the behavioral and social sciences. This is the High Risk, High Reward program. Just a personal note from a personal perspective, as an advocate for behavioral and social sciences, I'm always really thrilled when a science-wide program like High Risk, High Reward takes the time to welcome and invite members of our field to participate in their initiatives and apply for funding. So for this reason, I want to encourage everyone in the audience to return the favor and consider whether they have strong application to send into the HRHR program and submit that science if possible. Today, we'll hear from 4 speakers who I'll just introduce by name very briefly. These are all individuals representing the High Risk, High Reward program. First is program leader Ravi Basavappa, also Becky Miller, who is program officer, Ellie Murcia, program specialist, and Makiba Charles Sayende, who's the health science policy analyst. Before we get started today, just a couple quick logistical details. The webinar will be 60 minutes in length. So you know, participants' cameras and mics will be off for the session, so please do enjoy your lunch while you're watching. I know some of you submitted questions in advance. We also encourage you to ask questions during the live event using the Q&A function of the webinar Zoom platform below. Please do take advantage of that feature. Most of the questions, I don't know what that meant. This event will be recorded, just so you know, and a video will be made later. Stay tuned to your email a week or 2 after this event to receive that video. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Charles Sayende to share her screen and begin the presentation. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much to Andy and the APS team for the introduction, as well as for hosting us. I would also like to take a moment to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for the webinar. It's our absolute pleasure to be here this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're joining us from. And most importantly, to be able to share these funding opportunities with you all. So as Andy mentioned, some of you graciously provided some questions in advance. If we do not get to those questions, please utilize the HRHR or the high risk, high reward inboxes to send your questions into us. We will definitely get a response out to you. And that is if we don't get to your question today. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and get started. So the National Institutes of Health is the largest biomedical research agency in the entire world. And its mission is centered around life. It seeks fundamental knowledge about the nature and the behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness, as well as reduce disability. There we go. So our budget for fiscal year 2021 was actually 42.9 billion, sorry. Most of that was designated to external research. So most of that funding goes out the door with a small percentage of that funding being used for NIH internal research, and then an even smaller percentage being designated to administrative purposes. So we really want to get those dollars out to be able to support biomedical research. The NIH is made up of 27 institutes and centers, and each one of them have a different scientific area of research that they support, and their names pretty much give you an indication of their area of concentration. However, there's also the Office of the Director, which we have in red down below there, and that office is pretty special, and I'll explain why it's so special. So realizing that some of the complex problems that we currently face or will face in the future requires a more transdisciplinary approach, the NIH developed a roadmap, and that roadmap was created in 2003, and it provides a framework for the coordination of trans-NIH initiatives. The Common Fund was born out of this roadmap in 2006, and it receives a separate pot of money, and that money is devoted specifically to its vision and purpose. The Common Fund is run in the Office of Strategic Coordination within the Office of the Director. So that's why I was alluding to it being so special. So that vision, the vision for the Common Fund was to address emerging scientific opportunities as well as pressing challenges. And it basically allowed us to accelerate how quickly we were able to take those research findings and translate that into health interventions as well. The Common Fund basically was to serve as a test bed for high risk enabling programs to overcome significant obstacles to scientific progress and capitalize on emerging scientific opportunities. So most of the programs within the Common Fund have a limited term investment where they are around for a capped period of time. And the idea behind that was to go ahead and accelerate that pace of discovery. This high risk, high reward program is an exception to that limited term investment. We do not have a cap on the duration of our program, which is great. It also allows us to really work towards moving the needle on some of the pressing challenges and kind of shifting paradigms as well. Each and every one of the Common Fund programs, and there are 28 of them, have these core criteria. They must be unique, so they're providing new solutions, they are transformative, they are cross-cutting. Remember, we are focusing on a trans-NIH approach. They must be synergistic, so they are going to add value. And they must be catalytic as well. So they have to be able to achieve and meet those deliverables within a certain amount of time. If we were to take a look at those 28 programs within the Common Fund, you'd see that it can be organized into 4 what I call buckets. Looking at data, tools, and methods, you would find programs such as the Bridge to Artificial Intelligence, and that program is working to generate new flagship data sets and best practices for machine learning analysis and for machine learning analysis, sorry. We also have the Gabrielle Miller Kids First Pediatric Research Program, and that program is working to develop a large-scale database of clinical and genetic data from patients with childhood cancers and structural birth defects, as well as their families. If we look at the new paradigms bucket, or bracket, we have, for instance, the Physical Activity Consortium. And that consortium is looking at the impact of physical exercise on the body. So we all know that exercise is good for us, but what is actually happening in the body that makes it so good? When we look at the clinical partnership bucket, we can see that there's the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And that network is going to bring together a lot of stakeholders. So we have patients, we have clinicians, we have scientists, all of them coming together so that they can diagnose rare diseases. Basically, building a network of folks that can work collaboratively to move the needle on a major roadblock. And then the fourth bucket, we have the transformative workforce bucket. And in that bucket is where the high risk, high reward, or the HR program sits. And why is all of this so important? It's important because these programs may have funding opportunities that may be available to you for your particular area of science, but also because these programs also make freely accessible to you data, instruments, protocols, reagents that you can access. So we would also like to highly recommend, in addition to checking out the HR program, you also check out the other programs from the Common Fund for additional opportunities. So all these programs are fantastic, but you're here to learn about the HR program. So that program, there are 4 different initiatives. There's the Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award, the Transformative Research Award, as well as the Early Independence Award. And all 4 of them have annual funding opportunities that tend to be released in about the spring months, and they have due dates or closing deadlines around August and September. So since we are in August, what does that mean? That means that we have 4 funding opportunities that are currently open and accepting applications. So if you have a high risk, an innovative, a creative idea in the back of your head, go ahead and try to pull together an application. If not, barring unforeseen circumstances, we'll be back again next year with other funding opportunities. Another key part of these 4 programs is, although they have nuances that make eligibility different, all of them are searching for high risk, high impact ideas. No preliminary data is required, and that's pretty unique and special. I'm sure you guys will agree. Trust us when we say no preliminary data is required. The reviewers will look for feasibility of your idea, but we do recognize that if you have an innovative or an out-of-the-box idea, you may not have experiments that have been run, or you may not have data that is readily available. So we recognize that, and we do not need preliminary data. And also, we welcome any topic, any area of science that is relevant to the NIH mission. So we know that that's a very broad umbrella. So any topic that is relevant to behavioral sciences, social sciences, the more formal sciences, basic, applied, clinical research, as well as translational research, we welcome those applications. And we are always trying to expand our portfolio. So if you were to look at our website where we have our funded projects, and you don't see something in your scientific area, it may be that we have not found you and your idea. So please do not let that discourage you. Go ahead and put in an application once you meet eligibility and your area is along the lines of the NIH mission. And I also want to take a moment just to recognize that we do recognize that great science comes from a variety of backgrounds, including scientific areas. So we highly encourage applications from scientists of diverse backgrounds, different institutions than the norm, as well as, and I mentioned, scientific areas. So if you are coming from a more teaching focused institution or a private laboratory, we still welcome your application. And before I go any further, I would like to recognize our working group. This is the NIH High Risk, High Reward Working Group that really allows us to run such a large program. It is made up of representatives from almost each and every institute and center across the NIH, and they basically help us to guide and manage this program and ensure that it truly is a trans NIH initiative. So enough of me talking. I would like to hand over to Ravi so that he can dive deeper into 3 out of the 4 high risk, high reward initiatives. So Ravi?
Yes. Thank you very much, Makiba, for the introduction. And thank you, Andy and colleagues, for providing us the opportunity to discuss the HRHR program with you and your members. So next slide, please, Makiba. Thank you. So as Makiba said, I'll provide a little more description about 3 of the initiatives, 3 of the 4 initiatives. And these are the first 3 that were created as part of the HRHR program. I will describe them in chronological order, in the order in which they were created. So the first is the Pioneer Award. This was started in 2004 when Dr. Zerhouni was still the NIH director. The intention of this award is to support individual scientists who have track records of doing pretty innovative, creative stuff in the past. But going forward, they're proposing something that is pretty bold and if successful would have a large impact on biomedical or behavioral research. This opportunity is open to, and we've had funding opportunities annually every year since 2004. This is open to people at all career stages. We've made awards to beginning assistant professors as well as to very senior full professors, members of the National Academy. But in practice, although it is open to people at all career stages, people who tend to apply and receive the awards are those who are well or established investigators, such as associate professors or more senior. We call it the Pioneering Award. We call it the Pioneer Award, and by that we mean that the research that's proposed must be a new research direction. It should not be something that's along the trajectory of research in the applicant's laboratory. It shouldn't be the next expected steps or a logical extension. It should really be a discontinuity in the trajectory of the research that the applicant has been pursuing. There are unique features of the Pioneer Award in all respects, from application to review to administration. One of the unusual features in the application packet is that require 3 letters of reference. Another unusual feature is that we require that Pioneer awardees commit at least 51% research effort in the first 3 years of the Pioneer Award. The idea behind this is that we want the Pioneer Award to be the major research effort in the awardee's laboratory. And here it's important to point out that this is research effort only. So in this calculation, we do not include effort toward clinical duties, administrative duties, or teaching duties, just research. In the final 2 years of the award, in years 4 and 5, we allow the awardees to taper down their research effort toward the Pioneer Award program to 33, 35, and 25% respectively. And this allows the Pioneer awardee to transition to other sources of support if they wish to continue that line of research. So there's no type 2 for a Pioneer Award. People can certainly submit another Pioneer Award application after the first one completes, but there's no continuation. Like Makiba said, no preliminary data are required for this initiative. The awards are $700,000 per year for 5 years, so people can go after pretty ambitious ideas through this initiative. The receipt date is September 10th, so it's coming up pretty soon. But as Makiba said, we do plan to issue annual funding opportunities, barring unforeseen circumstances. Next slide, please. So I said there are important differences between the application packet for a Pioneer Award versus that for a traditional R01. For example, in an R01, the research strategy section is 12 pages long, but for the Pioneer Award, the major component of the application is a 3 to 5 page essay. It's pretty much a vision statement in which the applicant lays out his or her vision of how he or she hopes to have a major impact on biomedical behavioral science in 5 years with that level of funding. But in that essay, we do ask the applicant to explicitly address programmatic items of interest, such as overall, what is a scientific problem? Why is it an important problem? And in general terms, what is the pioneering approach that you plan to take? What is the evidence for innovativeness that you've had in the past? Your track record of doing exceptionally creative research, being able to challenge paradigms, establish new paradigms, overcome substantial technical and conceptual hurdles in the past. Since this is supposed to be pioneering, then how is this research direction different from what you've been doing? And finally, the suitability for the award. Why is the idea that you're proposing, why is it really suitable for the Pioneer Award versus, for example, more conventional mechanisms for NIH funding? For the R01 application, the substantial details are required for human and animal subjects, especially, and when the budget exceeds $250,000 per year, then a detailed budget is required. But for the Pioneer Award, there's no detailed budget. The applicants are asked to request $3.5 million, just that one figure, and no budget information beyond that. There's no opportunity for the applicant to provide any information beyond that. The other information regarding animal and human subjects, that information is required when appropriate, when animals or human subjects are going to be used. But we educate the reviewers not to expect the same level of detail in those sections as they might expect in a standard R01 application. Letters of support are encouraged for R01 typically, but they're not allowed for the Pioneer Award. And that's because there's a very great focus on the qualities, the qualifications of the PI. Only single PI applications are allowed. More to that, only the biosketch of the applicant is allowed. Biosketches of other key personnel are not allowed in the application. Again, research effort depends on the project. For the Pioneer Award, it's at least 51% research effort for the first 3 years. Letters of reference are not allowed for the R01, but 3 are required for the Pioneer Award. Next slide, please. The review process is also quite distinct from standard NIH practice. And all the HRHR initiatives have multi-phase review process. For the Pioneer Award, it has 2 phases. In the first phase, all the applications that are received are first reviewed by electronic reviewers. These are reviewers who don't discuss the applications among themselves. And they are chosen such that 2 of the 3 reviewers have expertise in the broad domain of the topic of the application, for example, neuroscience or immunology or behavioral social science research. But there's no real attempt to closely match the expertise of these reviewers to the topics of the applications that they see. The third of the 3 reviewers is chosen to have domain expertise well outside what's being proposed. And the contention behind this idea is that if it's really pioneering, then it should be, then the exceptional innovation and potentially broad impact should be easily appreciated by people who are well outside the field. So the 3 electronic reviewers provide scores and brief comments. These are again given to the second phase panel, sometimes called the editorial board or the interview board or the interview panel. And that's because, informed by the results from the first phase, this panel selects a subset of applicants, about 25 people or so, that they think are the most pioneering in that bunch of applicants. And these 25 are invited for interview in front of the entire panel. It's this panel then, and the composition of the panel, usually about 12 to 15 people, but with very diverse scientific backgrounds, including behavioral social sciences, as well as people doing neuroscience or diabetes research, hardcore structural biology, but a very broad scientific perspective is provided on the second panel. It's the second panel then that provides the individual scores from which the overall priority score is calculated. And as a formal step, there's a second level of review. The Council of Councils provides the council level of review for these and all other HRHR applications. Next slide, please. So this initiative was started in 2004, and we invested quite a bit of money in the initiative. We asked the question naturally, well, has this been worth the effort? To answer that question, we commissioned an independent entity, the Science and Technology Policy Institute, which is part of the Institute for Defense Analysis, to ask, well, what have the outcomes been for the Pioneer Award, the research outcomes and the impact in here that was produced by the awardees. So the Science and Technology Policy Institute, or STIPI, undertook this evaluation by doing a comparison analysis in which they compared the research output of the first 3 cohorts of the Pioneer awardees to matched R01 investigators. These are investigators who are very similar to the Pioneer awardees in the cohort, in that in terms of overall funding, science area, pedigree, and such things. So very closely matched, except they don't have a Pioneer award. The second comparison group was HHMI, or Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigators. The third, and so when STIPI conducted this evaluation, then they found, using a multimodal analysis, that the Pioneer awardees tended to, when compared to the R01, matched R01 investigators, it was the Pioneer awardees that tended to produce the more innovative, more impactful research. We interpret this to mean that it's something about the Pioneer Award mechanism itself that's providing an opportunity for these highly accomplished scientists to produce something that is more innovative and more impactful than they might otherwise be able to produce. So if you have a set of highly accomplished investigators and you give some people in that set the Pioneer Award and the remaining people in that set an R01, it seems that the people with the Pioneer Award are able to produce cooler research. Might be because of the flexibility that we allow, or that they are encouraged to go after really risky ideas. When compared to HHMI investigators, they are about as impactful and innovative, especially when normalized by the level of funding. Next slide, please. So based on that evaluation, Dr. Collins decided to continue the Pioneer Award program. Next slide, please, Makiba. The next initiative is the new Innovator Award program. This was started in 2007. This is very similar in spirit to the Pioneer Award initiative in that it seeks to support exceptionally innovative and potentially broadly impactful science. Unlike the Pioneer Award, though, this is restricted to people who are early stage career investigators. The definition that we use at NIH for early career stage investigators, an individual who is within 10 years of receipt of their terminal research degree or completion of clinical training, and who have not yet received a substantial NIH award. One of the conditions or requirements for the new Innovator awardee is that they are asked to commit at least 25% research effort. So this is less research effort that we require of new Innovator awardees, which allows them to pursue other sources of support in which they can really establish their research career. Again, no preliminary data are required. Unlike the other initiatives in the HRHR program, the funding for the new Innovator Award is multi-year. Also, the total direct cost is $1.5 million that's given for a 5-year project period, but the funding is unusual in that in year 1, the funds for the first 3 years of the award are dispersed. So at the beginning of year 1, they would get all the funding for years 1, 2, and 3. And then the second segment would be for funding for years 4 and 5. And this allows some flexibility for the new Innovator awardee to ramp up and establish the research program as they best see fit. For example, they could use a lot of the money in the first segment of funding to buy capital equipment, or they can ramp up more slowly and add personnel as they wish over the first 3 years. It provides some unusual flexibility. The receipt date for the new Innovator Award program this year is August 20th, so it's very close. But again, if you're not able to meet this deadline, then you can maybe submit something for next year's receipt date, which we anticipate. Next slide, please. So briefly, this application package for the new Innovator Awards is also very different than for standard R01 application package. Here, the essay is 10 pages long, so we give these people a little more space to explain themselves. And again, in the essay, they are asked to address items of programmatic interest, such as what is the scientific problem, significance, and potential impact? What is the innovativeness of the approach? How are the risks and challenges? What do you think are the riskiest elements in what you're proposing? And how will they be mitigated? Suitability for the award and investigators' qualifications. No detailed budget really, at least to the standards of standard R01. Here we do require the applicants to fill out the annual detailed budget pages. So one for each year of the award, but we ask for only two numbers in the budget. One would be for all the equipment that they would plan to purchase in that year, and the other number is everything else. So equipment and everything else are the two numbers that we seek for each year. Letters of support are not allowed, again, because the focus in this initiative is very much on the qualities and the qualifications of the investigator. Only the bias sketch of the PI is allowed, no other bias sketches. Research effort, as I said, is at least 25%. Letters of reference are not allowed. Next slide, please. So the new Innovator Award review process is patterned after that of the Pioneer Award. Again, first phase review by electronic reviewers or mail reviewers. In this case, all three have the domain expertise in what's being proposed. In phase two, then, the editorial board, informed by the results from the first phase reviews, they select a subset of applications, typically 17 to 20% or so, to discuss and score. And we don't use interviews in this review process because we get so many more applications for the new Innovator Award initiative that it's not possible to scale up to and have interviews for all the people in the second phase. The editorial board then, after review of each application in the panel meeting, then provides the individual scores from which the overall priority score is calculated. Again, this goes to the Council of Councils for council level approval. Next slide, please. We asked STIPI to conduct an evaluation of the new Innovator Award initiative. They took a similar approach. In this case, the comparison group was early stage R01 investigators. That is, investigators who received the R01 has early stage investigator applicants. And again, they were matched, the new Innovator awardees to the ESI R01 awardees. Using a multimodal analysis, STIPI compared research outputs and found that it was the new Innovator awardees who were able to conduct science that seemed to be more impactful and more innovative than the ESI R01 awardees. Another important question that we asked STIPI to address was, well, what is the impact of the new Innovator Award on its recipient compared to an R01, the impact of an R01 on its recipient? STIPI found that the career impact of the new Innovator Award on its recipient is about the same as the impact of a career impact of a R01 on its recipient. And this is fine with us because the underlying reason that we asked this question was we were concerned whether we were doing these new Innovator awardees harm by encouraging them to go after risky research when they're still at a particularly vulnerable stage in their career. You know, they haven't received tenure yet, typically. But STIPI found that actually they do pretty well, although they are pursuing exceptionally innovative research. So as long as we're not doing harm to them, that's good. Next slide, please. The third initiative is the Transformative Research Award. This was started in 2009, and the two major differences for this initiative versus the other three initiatives is that here single PI or multi-PI applications are welcome, whatever suits best what's being proposed. The second major difference is that the budgets are flexible. So whereas for the other three initiatives, the budgets are pretty much set and have strict budget caps. For the Transformative Award, the budgets are flexible. People can request whatever budget they really think is commensurate with the scope of what's being proposed. So people have successfully proposed budgets of $200,000 per year in direct costs or $2 million per year in direct costs. Again, no preliminary data are required. Some people have asked or frequently asked question as well, I'm going to ask for more than $500,000 in direct costs per year. Do I need to get pre-approval? The answer is no, because these large budgets are allowed per the FOA, so no pre-approval or prior approval is needed. Another very interesting feature for this initiative is that we are piloting anonymized review. And I should say before we leave the slide that the receipt date for the Transformative Research Award Initiative is September 1st, so it's also coming up pretty soon. Next slide, please. The reason that we are trying anonymized review is that we want to see whether we can improve the diversity of applicants that we receive to this initiative, and then perhaps adapt this to the other HRHR initiatives. We tend to get the usual suspect applicants and institutions applying to the HRHR initiatives. We really are seeking to diversify the applicant pool for this and the other initiatives. So for the Transformative Research Award Initiative, we provide specific instructions in the FOA about how to provide anonymized applications. We ask only two components of the application to be anonymized. These are the specific aims page and the research strategy section. And we give in the FOA how to anonymize it. Well, I won't go through all the bullet points, but I think the instructions are fairly clear. Next slide, please. So how are we using this anonymized review then? How are we implementing this? We are using the same three-phase review process that's been used since 2009, but we're adapting it for anonymized review so we have an editorial board again of 12 to 15 people who have a diversity of scientific backgrounds. In the first phase this year, they will have access only to the anonymized specific aims page. And based on their evaluation of this anonymized specific aims page, then they will select a subset of applications that go to the second phase. And the second phase is the technical review phase. There will be 3 technical reviewers per application, and they will have expertise in the topics of the applications that they see. In this year, they will have access only to the anonymized specific aims page and the anonymized research strategy section. They will be asked to provide feedback on whether what's being proposed really is exceptionally innovative for the field, has a potential for unusually broad impact, or whether it's more standard R01-like, more incremental, or maybe too wacky even for this initiative. So they provide feedback that's given to the editorial board so that in the third phase, the editorial board selects a further set of applications to discuss and score. And it's only after the editorial board selects this set of applications to discuss that they are allowed to see the full applications. It's only at this stage of deciding which ones to discuss do they see who the PIs are, from which institutions they come, and all the other relevant components of the application, such as human subjects, animal subjects, and whatever else is provided in the application. And by federal statute, they are required to consider all 5 standard review criteria, including the investigator and the environment, and those are discussed in the panel meeting. And it's this editorial board then that provides the individual scores from which the overall priority score is calculated. Again, this goes to council for a second level review. Next slide, please. So I should say that this is the second year of the anonymized review pilot. The first year, I think, went pretty well in that most of the applicants were able to follow the directions pretty well, and the reviewer said that they were still able to evaluate the application or components for transformative potential. So we're conducting it this year and probably next year. I won't belabor the point, but a similar outcomes evaluation was concluded recently for the Transformative Research Award Initiative. And in this case, the comparison groups were the pioneer awardees and matched or similarly qualified R01 investigators. STIPI found that the Transformative Research awardees tended to produce research that's about as innovative and impactful as pioneer awardees, and more impactful and innovative than similarly qualified R01 investigators. Next slide, please. And that's it for me. I'll hand it off to Becky.
All right, thanks, Ravi. So I'm talking about the last initiative, which is the Early Independence Award. You'll see that we currently have a funding opportunity announcement out, and the due date for that is September 3rd. This initiative was created to help really outstanding junior scientists who have the skills, the knowledge, the expertise already, and don't need a postdoctoral training to skip that postdoc and jump into an independent research program right off the bat. And so this began in 2011 when Dr. Collins saw some of the analyses that showed that the first R01 that investigators were getting was usually obtained at the age of 42, which is a long time to be waiting for your first NIH grant. And so this initiative was created to see if there are those outstanding scientists who are able to skip that postdoctoral training period and just begin their research career immediately and bypass 5 to 8 years of additional training that really wasn't necessary. So because we are looking for those junior scientists who are ready, we have really strict eligibility requirements. So for this current funding opportunity, you must complete your terminal research degree or finish your clinical training between June 1st of 2020 and September 30th of 2022. These dates are firm, so you must be within that window. We also are looking for applicants who are currently in a non-independent research position, because we want to find those people who are ready to launch an independent research career. So we have this requirement that you must be in a non-independent position at the time of your application. And we define that functionally rather than by title. So to be considered in a non-independent research position, first, your research agenda must be set through concurrence with mentors. Funding for your research is primarily coming through others as well. You have no assigned laboratory or research space from the institution, and you can't apply for an NIH R01 without special permission or a special waiver from your institution. So while you have to be in a non-independent position at the time you submit your application, once you do hit that submit button, you are then welcome to take an independent position, but it has to be after you hit that submit button. We also require 9.6 months each year dedicated to the Early Independence Award Research Project for the first 2 years. That's because we want you to be able to really focus on developing your research program. We don't want you to get bogged down with other duties like teaching, clinical, or administrative duties. And you're welcome to tailor down that research effort on your Early Independence Award project for years 3, 4, and 5, but we still are going to require you to spend at least 9.6 months of the year towards independent research in general. And once again, that's because we really want you to be able to establish your research program and get your feet under you. This initiative also requires that you have a host institution that's willing to provide you with an independent research position. So you'll need to reach out, look for institutions that are willing to submit this application on your behalf and provide you with that independent position. At NIH, we do not match applicants to host institutions. So that's something you'll need to do. We also have a limit on the number of applications an institution can submit each cycle. So there's only 2 applications allowed per institution. And this is really meant to help focus the institution on supporting those candidates that they're putting forward. We want to make sure that they're not overextending, that they will be able to truly provide the resources and commit to those candidates. So 2 applications per institution. A lot of institutions have internal selection processes that we're not involved in. So you'll want to check with your potential institution to make sure that you are in that in that process. Once again, we don't require preliminary data, and these awards are up to $250,000 per year for 5 years. Next slide, please. So we use the DP5 mechanism for this. We allow a 12-page research strategy essay, but just like the other initiatives, we utilize it in a very different way. We are interested in hearing about your proposal, your project. What's the challenge that you're going to approach? How is it significant? How is your approach innovative? But we're also very interested in what your qualifications are, because once again, we want to make sure that we're identifying those really outstanding junior scientists who already have the skills needed to launch an independent research career. So there's a large section in there that is dedicated to your qualifications and skills. And we also ask about your plans for your career development. You know, how are you going to be building this research program? We also have a lot of facilities and other resources section. We have a lot of additional instructions than is typically required in NIH applications. This is very detailed. There are a series of questions that the institution is expected to complete. And it's a very important component of the application. And it's something that should not be overlooked when you're putting putting together your proposal. We want to see that the institution is providing you with the resources, the mentorship, all the support needed for you to succeed. And so please make sure that this section is filled out in great detail. We use a modular budget. You can include letters of support, and we do require 3 to 5 letters of reference that are going to help attest to your readiness for independence and your skills and expertise. Okay, next slide, please. So once again, we have a 2-phase review process here. In the first phase, your application is going to go to 3 topic experts who are going to review your application and provide critiques. Those critiques are then going to go on to second phase to an editorial panel composed of broad thinking scientists from a diverse array of fields. They're going to use the critiques from those topic experts, but also look at your application from a higher level, from a 10,000-foot view for the purpose of the initiative. So we're looking at things like your qualifications, what are the resources that are going to be available to you, along with the actual project. So they'll use that all the information. They'll select a subset of applications to discuss at a panel meeting, and then provide final scores. Okay, next slide. So this is a bit different in administration than the other initiatives. This is still considered experimental. And so all of the awards are going to stay in the office of the director with me as the assigned program officer. However, I'm not an expert in many of the fields that we have represented in our portfolio. And so we ask for other NIH institutes and centers to assist us and provide us an affiliated program officer who can help oversee the scientific aspects of the project. This is also unique in that we do require a site visit, although these have tended to be virtual the last couple of years, but you will get a site visit just to make sure that you are progressing and that the institution is providing the resources that they promised you to ensure that you can succeed. Next slide, please. And like the others, we also had an evaluation conducted by STIPI. And in their comparison of the early independence awards, they used early stage investigators who received their very first NIH R01. So those are people who have traditionally gone through that postdoctoral training period and then received their first R01 compared to our awardees. And STIPI looked at their research outputs through bibliometric analyses, but also looked at career impact and trajectories. And what they found is that early independence awardees were just as ready and had very similar experiences to these early stage investigators who received their R01s, and that their research output was the same or actually higher than that comparison group. So what we're seeing is that we are able to successfully identify and support those investigators who do not need additional training, can skip the postdoc and begin their own independent research career, and shaving off 5 to 8 years of additional training that is not necessary. Next slide, please. So in the HRHR program, we get to enjoy a wide array of science that we get to oversee. And these are just some of the highlights, some examples of research that we have supported over the years. This is Dr. Opara. She's a recent Early Independence awardee, and she is involving and engaging the community to conduct research and examine the complex relationship between neighborhoods and substance abuse, mental health issues among urban youth. Next slide. We also have Dr. Schleider, another Early Independence awardee, who is creating single session interventions based on a network of symptoms and using those network of symptoms to then create these treatments for youth with major depression. Next slide, please. And this is Dr. Picciotto, who's a Pioneer awardee. And she's looking at how the brain of those who are addicted to high doses of opiates, how their brain actually helps regulate their body to promote survival when they're using in familiar environments. Whereas sometimes when you take an addict and put them in an unfamiliar environment, the risk of overdose increases. So next slide, please. So those are just some examples of research we have supported. But if you want to see a lot of our current awardees, we invite you to join us for our annual research symposium. It will be held June 8th through 10th of 2022 in Bethesda next year. And we bring together all of our awardees from the 4 initiatives to share their groundbreaking research. And it's also a great opportunity to network some of the most creative scientists in the US. And with that, I pass this on to Makiba.
Thank you both to Becky and to Ravi. We just want to close off by saying this quote from Steve Jobs here that says, "The people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who actually do." So even if you feel like your idea is really out of the box, we do encourage those types of applications. And we've come to the end of our presentation. Earlier, I mentioned that if we do not get to your questions, please send it to us via our mailboxes. So we've listed the email addresses of all 4 of those program initiatives so that you can send in your questions to us if you do need to step away from the webinar and move on to something else. We will go ahead and dive into the questions that we have received in advance in the limited time that we do have left. So I would like to invite Becky and Ravi to answer just a few questions that we have received. So I will start, since I see Becky, I'm going to start with you. So how important is the institutional support for the Early Independence Award? For example, if someone already has a position, would they be less likely to get the award than someone who has an offer that is contingent upon receiving this award?
Well, you need to think about the eligibility requirements first. So if you're already in an independent research position, you would no longer be eligible for the Early Independence Award. But if you're talking about a position that is going to be given to you regardless of whether or not you receive the Early Independence Award versus an offer that is contingent upon you receiving the award, I've seen it go both ways where some reviewers look at that contingent offer and they're like, well, I don't know if the institution's really committed to this person. But I've also seen some reviewers say, well, they've already got a position in the bag. What will this award do for them? I think the important thing is for you to really do a good job of building the picture of how this award will impact you, how you're going to use it to really accelerate your career, the importance of the problem that you're addressing, its significance, all of that. So build your full application. But if you have a contingent position, it won't kill you in the review.
Okay, thank you. Ravi, can you provide examples of what the NIH program would not fund because although the proposed work had a similar or high reward potential, it is currently deemed too risky. So not cutting edge, but just extreme risk. Do you have any examples or any instances where we had a high impact proposal, but it was just too risky?
Can't get into details of particular applications, of course, but in general, you know, if it violates more than one law of physics, that's usually not a good thing. I'm just teasing. So if it's too risky, that means that either that the logic underlying what's being proposed is not sufficiently compelling. So all of what we seek is stuff that is very innovative in the sense that we don't have much supporting data for it. There is logic that convinces the reviewers that this is actually plausible and it may be feasible in the 5-year project period. If it's too risky, then I don't feel that I should give any particular examples, but it's okay.
All right, thanks. So Becky, does a member of APS with a PhD in psychology have to remain associated with a college or university in order to qualify for these research awards?
Yes, so it's important to remember that the NIH funds institutions, not individuals. And so in order for you to submit an application, you have to have an institution submit it on your behalf. So you do need to be affiliated with an eligible institution. The institutions for this program that are eligible are any US-based domestic institution. So yes, you will need to find someone to submit your application on your behalf.
Thank you. Ravi, are interdisciplinary collaborations welcomed? I'm a cognitive psychologist who collaborates with a humanist.
Sure, that's fine, especially for the Transformative Research Award. For the other 3 initiatives, only single PI applications are allowed, but it's fine for even in those initiatives to have collaborators. But for those particular applications, it should be clear to the reviewers that it's the scientific vision of the PI that's being pursued. He or she is the one who's setting the scientific agenda, and the collaborators are providing complementary expertise.
Thank you. Becky, are there opportunities for those working in schools that emphasize more teaching, like regional universities?
Yes, we welcome any institution that's eligible to submit an application. So we're looking to expand our portfolio, including the institutions that we are supporting. So we do welcome them. We know that science comes from a wide range of institutions.
Thank you.
Makiba, if you don't mind me jumping in just very briefly to just mention to our attendees that our panelists have very graciously offered to stick around for just a couple extra minutes just to answer a couple more questions that might come up. If you do have to leave, again, this event will be recorded, but other than that, Makiba, glad to pass it back to you to continue.
Thank you, Andy. And if you do have to step away, please note our email addresses and email us. We will get a response out to you. Ravi, so can you give examples of the types of studies that NIH is interested in funding through these mechanisms? Are there specific areas that you guys are focusing on?
Anything within the broad mission of NIH is fine. We're agnostic to particular science topic as long as it's within the broad mission of NIH. That being said, we're at the same time seeking to diversify the scientific portfolio for the HR program. So most of the, we do have discretionary, or we use a substantial fraction of the funds available to support awards based on programmatic priorities. And one of the programmatic priorities that we explicitly consider is whether or not the application would diversify the scientific portfolio for that initiative. But we don't articulate, typically we don't articulate particular areas of scientific emphasis.
Okay, thank you. Becky, Can you share examples of award-winning proposals for these initiatives, both clinical intervention or non-clinical intervention?
I'm not sure if we have clinical, like the clinical applications available, but we do have example applications on our website. So if you go to commonfund.nih.gov/high-risk, you can go to the different award that you're interested in, and there is an application and award guide that has some example applications that you are welcome to look through. But just keep in mind that they're old applications, so they may not be current with the current guidelines and the funding opportunities.
Thank you. Ravi, someone is looking for any additional helpful tips that you think reviewers really concentrate on for these awards?
Sure. So the major, well, first thing I should say is that we have hosted informational webinars for prospective applicants for each of these 4 initiatives this year, and they are recorded and available on our website. So I do recommend that you take a look at those, because we do go into detail about the application process and the review process and what the reviewers look for. The 2 major emphases for these initiatives are for our exceptional innovation potential for unusually broad impact. So in your application, you should weave those concepts and hammer on those concepts throughout your application. And although we do say for some of these that to write an essay, sometimes the prospective or the applicants interpret that to mean that they should write something that's very narrative in form using floorhead prose, but that's really doesn't fare well in review. You're expected to use very crisp, clear language, be concrete in what you're proposing, and so that it's readily apparent to the reviewers what it is you want to do, why it's important to do, what the impact would be, and overall the approach that you would take. And since we do ask you to pursue risky projects, that you also identify what you think are the riskiest elements in your research and how you might mitigate those, for example, by using alternate approaches if what you originally proposed doesn't work.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. I'm going to stick with you because we got a question for clarification on something you mentioned. You talked about investigator qualifications when you talked about the new Innovator Award. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, for the new Innovator, as well as for the Pioneer Awards, it's whether the individual has had a track record of doing unusually innovative research and impactful research, again, whether he or she has been able to come up with new ideas, new perspectives in a field, whether that has had impact, and also suitability for that person's background in pursuing the research that's being proposed.
Great. What are some of the types of reasons why something would be more suitable for this award versus a traditional R01?
For the HRHR program in general,
yeah,
I think things that for which there are not a lot of supporting data. The NIH R01 review tends to be pretty conservative. There have been several studies that attest to that, using different modes of analysis, using principal component analysis, for example, to determine the weight of each of these 5 standard review criteria and determining the overall priority score. And it seems that it's the approach score in which the reviewers evaluate the supporting data and the experimental plan and assessing the feasibility of what's being proposed. So something that for which you don't have a lot of supporting data and for which you haven't worked out all the details yet, but you have a pretty good idea of how you're going to go about doing it and what the real risk elements are and how they might be mitigated, that would be better suited for one of these initiatives versus a conventional R01.
And this is the final question that I am seeing in the Q&A box. So, and I guess Ravi, you could start, and Becky, you can finish up. But would a PhD with a 10-year plus adjunct faculty member currently associated with a university teaching institute qualify as an award applicant?
Not for the new Innovator Award, because he or she has to be within 10 years of receipt of PhD and yet not have yet received a substantial NIH funding. Becky can talk about the Early Independence Award. But for the Pioneer Award and for the Transformative Research Award, that individual would be eligible.
Yeah, for the Early Independence Award, it all depends on if you meet that narrow eligibility window, and it is single PI only as well. And then there's the other criteria about non-independence and all of that. So it will really be it's specific to each initiative. You'll have to look through those requirements.
All right, so thank you, Becky and Ravi. And I would love to hand over to Andy to wrap us up. I want to remind folks, please utilize those inboxes, send us your questions. We are here to provide support for your application as well. What Becky and Ravi did not mention is that they graciously provide time to just review the scope of an application, not intense fine details about your application, but the actual scope of the award. And they do this if you can reach out to those inboxes to request the time. So Andy, I'll hand over to you. Thank you, APS, so much for having us.
Absolutely, and I can keep it just very short and say thank you so much to Dr. Basavappa and your team, the panelists, for presenting here on the topic of your wonderful program. Like I mentioned last time we spoke, when I hear these opportunities, I sort of want to apply for each and every one of them. They sound so wonderful. So I hope our members who are here in the session today are sort of equally inspired. Thank you also. Want to thank my colleague Nick Antunch and Kekoa Erber from my team who helps coordinate these events. APS members who are here, please do stay tuned for further webinars in the series. As always, please do write into APS if you have any special requests for science funders you'd like to hear from or the like. We would love your feedback and know what you're interested to hear more about. But in the meantime, thank you again to HRHR program. And I hope everyone here has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.